Hello, everyone. So, today we have a different kind of episode. One that's definitely going to be a longer look, and we're going to be talking about the dark side of artificial intelligence, AI. And what I mean by that is we'll be exploring the concept of a topic that is near and dear to my heart, AI bias, uncovering how it happens, why it matters, and what you can do to mitigate it. So, settle in, get your favorite beverage, and let's explore this topic together.
Welcome to TechSips with Nadina, where bold ideas brew and digital strategies simmer to perfection. I'm your chief strategy architect, here to guide you through the caffeine charged world of CRM, IT, and yes, what I playfully call digit transformation. Think of it as a bite sized tech wisdom like the perfect espresso shot to kickstart your digital journey.
Now, as you know, AI is changing rapidly around us. I've been talking about AI now for a couple weeks, and if you've looked into the news, things like self driving cars have been coming up, and even things about robots. Well, behind the scenes, in many of the technologies we use every day, think about the personalizations from Netflix and Amazon, and think about your spam filters clean, keeping your inbox clean. Think about the agents that are now coming on board to help with your inquiries. Is all being powered by AI. And guess what? AI just isn't perfect, and it can inherently amplify human bias. And this can lead to very unfair practices and discriminatory outcomes. I want you to think about this. Think about if you were baking a cake, you had a recipe, and it calls for milk. But you didn't know it at the time, but your milk was spoiled. When you look at the milk, everything looks fine. When you smell the milk, everything looks fine, but it's actually spoiled. And when you bake the cake, no matter how much you follow the ingredients and the recipe and make sure that you're doing everything in the right order, that cake still does not come out the correct way and it turns out bad and it can make people sick. And similarly, if AI systems are trained with bad data, they can produce bad results and biased results, and this can have harmful consequences on us as a society. So, what do we mean by this? Well, bias can manifest in many different ways. Facial recognition system being less accurate identifying certain races, certain genders, AI powered systems that are supposed to help with advertising, and it discriminates against certain minority groups because of historical data. But what are we talking about? What are we really talking about? Let's look at some real world examples so that we can get grounded. So first up is Amazon. And specifically, we're talking about Amazon's recruiting tool. Now, this recruiting tool actually had to be scrapped. It was their AI powered recruiting tool. And what was found is that it had a bias to women. And the tool was trained on resumes that were submitted to Amazon over a 10-year period. So 10 years of data. And since the tech industry is historically male dominated, the tool learned to favor male candidates, not because of the overall tool wanting to do this, but because of the data that it had been fed, but this is the data that it had. And this highlights how the historical bias can creep in because in the past, there were less women working in tech. And so this is what the tool was trained on and what it had to go against. And because this was data that was stuck in the past and was being fed to this AI system, it too was stuck in the past. And we need to do better with this type of bias. Now, Google Photos in 2015, they came under a lot of heat because they were tagging images of Black people as gorillas. And this was due to a lack of diversity in the training data for the image recognition algorithm. And this caused a widespread of criticism and underscoring the importance of AI bias in AI system. And it was one of those pivotal moments where how could this happen, right? People were, why did this happen? But it was based on the data, and this was real world consequences happening. And well, let's look at healthcare. So, a study revealed that an algorithm used to predict which patients would need extra medical care, it was biased against, again, a certain group. And this algorithm used healthcare costs as a proxy for health needs. Now, because this certain group of patients tend to have lower healthcare costs due to systematic inequalities in access to healthcare, the algorithm underestimated their needs. And again, this is an example of how AI bias can have serious consequences in critical areas. It's really something that is happening every day. And these problems, these are highlighting real world consequences of AI bias. And they're not theoretical problems, they're problems that we're seeing right now, and it's impacting people's lives. And it's not just limited to these examples, there are tons of examples and tons of different groups that are being affected, and it's popping up here and there. It's popping up in loan applications and housing decisions and social media feeds, and it's all over, and it's like a optical illusion where you're seeing one thing and then there's actually something else completely. But how did we get here? The root of the problem, how is AI bias happening? So, how does AI bias happen? Well, it often starts with the data itself. If the data used to train the AI model is incomplete, underrepresented, or reflects existing societal biases, then the model will learn to perpetuate these biases. And you have to think about it, right? You're training, you're teaching this AI like a child. And if you expose it to just one specific perspective, one specific narrative, it's going to grow up with a limited understanding of the world. And it's not going to represent the diverse world that we live in. And so, what are some key types of AI biases that we are facing right now? So, there's sampling bias, and this occurs when the data used to train the AI model doesn't accurately represent the real world population it's meant to serve. So, with facial recognition systems, if they're being trained to, let's say, recognize different breeds of dogs, and it's only being shown a certain breed of dogs, let's say it's only being shown Chihuahuas. And yep, it can recognize Chihuahuas, but the minute you show it another breed of dog, is say a Maltese, then it doesn't know how to react to that data. Then there's also measurement bias, and this happens when the data that is collected or measured is measured in a way that introduces errors or distortions. So if we look at the loan approval system, it's relying on credit scores, and these are inherently already biased against certain groups because of credit history. And so it will perpetuate those biases in the lending decision. And so, really, we're using a broken ruler to measure the length of something, and we're hoping to get an accurate measurement, which will never happen because of what is happening. Then there's feature blinding. And so, this involves removing sensitive attributes like race and gender from the data in an attempt to prevent discrimination. However, this isn't always effective, as other correlating factors may still lead to that biased outcome. So, it's like hiding your identity by wearing a mask, but you're still wearing the same clothes and your same shoes, and so the AI can pick out that you're still you. And then, of course, there's the societal bias. AI systems can also simply reflect existing societal biases, even if the data itself is relatively unbiased. And this is because now the algorithm that is used to build these AI models are often designed to optimize for a certain outcome, which may inadvertently reinforce existing inequalities. And so it's like this self fulfilling prophecy. If you believe something to be true and you're more likely to act in a certain way to make it true. It's not just the data, but it's also the way these AI systems are built. The algorithms themselves, they might also have a hidden bias. And because now we have bias in the data, we have bias in the algorithm, then we're just kind of setting ourselves up for failure. And it's causing this ripple effect, these consequences of AI biases. It's this domino effect where one biased decision can lead to a chain reaction of negative consequences that are just perpetually falling and no one is stopping it. However, there are ways that people are working on to ensure that AI bias is decreasing. I would say three ways we need to think of it. We need to think of it from a pre-process, a in-process, and a post-process. So from a pre-processing technique, we need to have that data be cleaned and cleaning up the data. And you remember we talked about the importance of good data. And with pre-processing, it's about getting that data as clean as possible before we even start training the AI model. If you think about it like you're prepping a delicious soup and you're prepping your vegetables, right? You want to wash them, you want to chop them, and then you peel them to get rid of any impurities. And in the same way, you're going to pre-process these techniques to help remove anything in the data. So one popular pre-processing technique for your data is data augmentation. And this involves adding more data to the training set, but not just any data we're talking about. This is data that's specific to addressing gaps and imbalances that contribute to bias. And we want to ensure that as we enhance, we're enhancing data that will help. Another technique is resampling. So this involves adjusting the balance of the different groups in the data. If we have way more data from one group than another, we can either oversample the minority group or undersample the majority group. So basically create a level playing field and adjusting these portions so that we have the right amount of data and there's not a bias being created. And last but not least, in the data cleaning, it really involves identifying and correcting errors and inconsistency in the data. So double checking and understanding and really analyzing that data to ensure that it doesn't have these types of errors. Now, this will move us to the in process techniques. And this is where it comes in about building fair algorithms. We want to get to the nitty gritty of building fair algorithms. And it's like a construction building. We want to make sure that the foundation is solid and the structure is sound. And in that way, in processing techniques help us to build AI models that are inherently fair and unbiased. And so, one approach is to use fairness aware algorithms. And these algorithms are designed to take into account potential bias and try to mitigate them during the training process. And so, really, what you have is you have these built in levels in your tooling, and it makes sure that everything is straight and balanced. Another technique we can use is the regularization, and this involves adding constraints to the algorithm. So, it prevents it from overfitting the training data. And when I say overfitting, think about it like you're building that house on the perfectly tailored specific plot of land, but then you can't move it or you can't adopt it to a different location. So that's overfitting. So what regularization does is it helps us build more generalized AI models that are less likely to be biased. And now this will move us into our post processing techniques. So this is where we're really fine tuning for fairness. So when it comes to the fine tuning of our AI model after it's been trained, we want to make sure it's fair and unbiased as possible. And so we're polishing it up like a finished product, and post processing techniques will help us smooth out any rough edges or anything that we see in our AI model that's not working as intended. One technique is the re-weighting of prediction, and this involves adjusting the weights of different predictions based on demographic factors. For example, if we find out that our model is more likely to make incorrect predictions for a certain group, we can re-weight the prediction to give more weight to predictions for that group. and we are basically adjusting the volume. It's like being in a band and adjusting the volume of different instruments so that everything can sound balanced. The trumpets aren't too loud, the drums aren't too loud. Same that we can do here. Another critical aspect in our post processing is continuous monitoring and auditing. So this involves regularly checking our AI model for signs of bias and making adjustments as needed. It's really like getting the maintenance on your car done. You want to keep doing it regularly so that it's running smoothly. You don't want to do it as soon as the car stops, right? We want to be proactive here. And if one thing I want you all to remember is that as we are mitigating AI bias, it's not a one and done deal. It's an ongoing process that requires constant vigilance and constant adoption. So let's now take a step back and let's look at the bigger picture. We need to think about ethical implications for AI bias. And it's not just about building the AI that works, but it's also about building AI that's fair and respectable for humans. And this is where we should be thinking about ethical frameworks and where ethical frameworks come in. And really, what they're meant to do is provide guidelines and principles for responsible AI development. One example of this is Aslammer's AI principles. And these were developed by a group of AI researchers and thought leaders. And these principles emphasize things like safety, transparency, and accountability. And it's really like a code of conduct for AI developers. But ethics alone, it's not enough. We need to regularly regulate and police and ensure that AI is developed and used responsibly. And this is where government and international organizations come in to create laws and guidelines that promote ethical AI and prevent harm. For example, the European Union is working on an AI Act which aims to regulate highly risk AI systems. So, this will include things like AI used in healthcare, law enforcement, and transportation. And it's safety nets like these that will make sure AI is used for the ethical good. If we zoom out and we consider the broader societal consequences of AI bias, AI bias can perpetuate existing inequalities. We know that it can erode trust in institutions and it can really undermine the democracy. It can create a self fulfilling prophecy where certain groups are systematically disadvantaged, and that is not what we want. If we lived in a world where AI systems determined who got hired, who got loans, who got access to healthcare, and it was all perpetuated by bias, well, that would be a world we would want to avoid by all costs. And AI, it can hit to even an economical consequence. If you think about it, businesses that use biased AI systems can get reputational damage, legal challenges, and of course, financial loss. And it can lead to less productivity and innovation in the economy. And so, as AI continues to evolve and be more integrated into our lives, it's critical to prioritize the ethical, responsible development. This means not just focusing on the technical capabilities of AI, but also considering its potential impact on society. We need to ask ourselves tough questions. How can we ensure that AI systems are used for good and not for harm? How can we prevent AI from perpetuating and amplifying existing inequalities? And how can we make AI more transparent and accountable? These are not easy questions to answer, but they're questions that we must grapple with if we want to create a future where AI will benefit everyone. So, there you have it, a glimpse into the dark side of AI, the complexities of AI bias. It's a topic that's both challenging and crucial to address. And if we want to create a future where AI benefits for everyone, it's a topic that we have to continue to talk about. And so I urge you, get more informed, do a deeper dive, and spark the conversation. Make sure that any AI that you're using, that you're thinking about the biases and how to remove the biases, and you're raising awareness about this topic because together we can push for more ethical and responsible AI development. Until next time, and as we continue talking about AI, stay curious and remember ethical AI is for everyone's good.
So, raise your mug to the future. Let's clink virtual teacups and savor the sweet digital success. Subscribe to TechSips with Nadina, and together we'll craft your future one strategic blend at a time.